This is a game between Wesley So playing white and Magnus Carlsen. In this position, Wesley played bishop to c5, attacking black's rook, which does not have too many squares where to go, and after a little bit of thinking, Carlsen played rook to e8. And here, white continues chasing black's rook, and he plays queen to d7 with a fork, or a double attack, to the black's rook and the bishop, which is also simultaneously attacked by the white's rook from d1. At this point, it just looks like black is simply losing and it's time to resign, because there is no way for black to secure both of his pieces simultaneously. However, Carlsen prepared a brilliant counter blow. You can think about it for a second and check if you can find it out. The move is queen to d1. All of a sudden, black sacrifices the whole queen because afterwards there is a forcing continuation. Black continues with rook to e1, check. The only move that the white king has is king to g2, and black continues his attack with bishop to f1, check. And here, whatever white can do cannot help him anyway. In case the king goes back to g1 or to h1, it's simply checkmate after bishop to h3. Sort of back rank mate. Let's take a move back. In case the white's king goes forward to f3, then the trouble comes from another side. Here black can play knight to e5 with a double attack to white's king and the queen. Therefore, the queen is gonna be captured on the next move, which will leave black with an extra rook at the end of the line. At this point, Wesley resigned. By the way, let's come back to the starting position of the combination, and let me make just a quick note for you so that you can learn something useful for your games. And in that case, you will not only be able to admire the brilliant moves played by Carlsen, but you'll be able to get benefit for yourself and use some of these ideas in your own games. So how can you find the moves like that in the real game? Because during these games you know that it's going to be queen sack, and therefore you can look for the ways to give away your queen, which hopefully you don't normally do while playing your standard games. However, there is one great tip from another world champion, Smirnov, who said that from all of the varieties of chess tactics, there are three most common ideas, which is check, fork, and pin. And in this example, you can see that it started from the fork or double attack from white to the black's rook and bishop, and then black started to use the checks on each of his moves. Queen takes d1, then rook to e1, it's check once again, bishop f1, check, and at the end of the line, after king to f3 and knight e5, it ended up with the fork. So if you focus your attention on these three tactical motifs, check, fork, and pin, you'll be able to dominate in different tactical complications. Alright, and now let's move on to the second brilliant sacrifice from Carlsen in another game. The next game is played in the World Championship match on 2016 between Magnus Carlsen, who is playing white here, and Sergey Karjakin. In this position, it looks like white is on the brink of disaster. His king is in trouble actually. Black is threatening to play either queen g2 or move one of his heavy pieces on the first rank, and the white's king will be checkmated from that angle. However, white strikes first. You can pause the video for a moment and think if you can find the winning shot for white here, which Carlsen found in the actual game and black resigned immediately. It was the move queen to h6. Just like a genie out of the bottle, out of nothing, white is sacrificing the whole queen. And no matter what black does, let's say if pawn takes, then simply rook takes f7, and the king is checkmated. Let's take a step back. If black captures the queen with the king, there follows rook h8, and the king is also checkmated. Therefore, Karjakin resigned, and it was a very important victory that helped Carlsen retain his title of the world champion in 2016. Alright, now let's go back to the starting position of this example and very quickly think about the way how you can find similar moves in your own games. Similarly to the previous game, you can see that white started by giving check to black's king. And if you focus your attention on this question, how can I check opponent's king, you'll find out that there are only two ways in the given position. It's either queen to h6 or rook to h8. So you can quickly calculate those moves and see if there is any benefit for you in playing one of them. Of course, it doesn't mean that you're gonna sacrifice your pieces for nothing, but if you see that there is a winning continuation, then there is definitely a reason for you to go there. If you studied my course, The Grandmaster Secrets, then you know about the power of the forcing moves, how they help you simplify your calculation and find those powerful moves, and checks is one of those ways to deliver the forcing move and to win the game. Alright, so once again, queen h6 and white won, a very brilliant game, and let's move on to the next example. This time Carlsen is playing against Anand. It is white to play here. As we can see, white is already putting quite strong pressure on the black's king side. All of the white's pieces are looking towards the black's king side. And now white played g4 to eliminate this bishop from f5, which is currently blocking the way of the white's rooks. Anand retreated bishop to e6, trying to trade off at least a pair of bishops to neutralize some of the white's pressure. White captured the bishop, black has to take with a pawn. It's impossible for black to move the knight because whenever a knight moves, it's immediate checkmate. Queen to h8. Therefore, the black's knight has to stand on d4 and close the diagonal for the white's dark squared bishop. Thus, black captured on e6 with a pawn. He took pawn takes e6. Now white continued playing those forcing moves, those checks. He took the rook on f8. Black recaptured with the bishop, that's the only thing he can do really. And here comes knight to f6 check. At this point it's already pretty obvious that black's king is somewhat in big trouble. A lot of the white's pieces are starting to attack it. Anand played king to h8. Here it's interesting that in this position Carlsen actually missed the winning sacrifice, which he anyway played on the next turn. But it's anyway quite interesting to notice that, we all are human beings, and even Carlsen being the world champion and such a great player, he can also miss sometimes the tactical shots. So not only we are, you and me can miss them, Carlsen can do that too. Alright, here Carlsen played c3, and after knight c6 he finally found the winning sacrifice. And you can pause the video for a second and think if you can find the winning blow. It's a really brilliant sacrifice. Well, the sacrifice is actually quite tempting here because the knight is attacking the queen, so it's really easy for white to sacrifice the queen. You just need to find the right way to do that. And the way is knight e8 check. While doing so, white is checking the black's king, but at the same time, notice that the knight is blocking the line for the black's queen and rook, and therefore the bishop on f8 is left unprotected due to that interruption on the last rank. And in case black captures the queen, there comes rook f8 checkmate. Let's see if there's anything else that black can do. Let's say the king just moves back to g8. In this case, white can insist on giving his queen away by all means, and he can still play queen h8 and force black into the position that we have already seen before. King takes and rook takes f8, checkmate. By the way, oftentimes students ask me how can I train my visualization skills, because in order to find out the combination you not only need to know the tactical motifs, but you should be able to visualize all these moves before playing your move on the board. And one of the good ways to do so is just to first of all know the moves of the game or find the tactical combination, and after that go back to the starting position before the combination happened and just visualize all the moves of the combination once again. But this time you can focus on visualization. You don't actually think about the moves, you know the moves already. You just train visualization alone, and that's a powerful way to train and develop this skill. This is the game between Hammer and Carlsen. Hammer played here bishop to e3. He noticed that the black's knight is almost trapped there on e2, and white is just tries to capture it, and he tries to surround the knight first and then to capture it. So he plays bishop to e3, and black grabbed the pawn, and white continues rook e1, continuing his plan. At this point, it's obvious that the knight has no easy way to escape from the threat. However, black has something totally different in mind. Can you find what Carlsen did here? Well, knowing that it's gotta be queen sacrifice, it may be not that difficult to find the move queen to h5. However, during the real game of chess, I imagine how hard it could be to notice a move like that. And after pawn captures, it's rook to h4, very beautiful checkmate, which is delivered with only two pieces, like a rook and the knight, in the middle of the game, which is quite a rare situation. Very beautiful combination and great play by Magnus Carlsen. And here's the final game from this video, where Carlsen was very young. He was 12 years old, and yet he was playing very powerful chess at that moment of time already. Black player is Hestad, is not a very well-known player, I think. Anyway, it is white to play, and Carlsen played knight to h6, starting to bring in his pieces towards black's king. Black continued with knight to g5, somewhat trying to trap that knight on h6. It's interesting that in one of the previous examples that we have seen against Hammer, that guy also tried to trap Carlsen's knight, but it seems to be a really deadly idea for the one who tries it. Anyway, let's continue. Carlsen played pawn to f4, opening up the f-file for his rook. Black captured the pawn, white continued with queen takes the pawn. Notice that black can't really win the knight, because in case of king takes h6, which did not happen in the game, white will play h4 using pin along this diagonal, and he'll take the knight back and will continue his attack. Anyway, in the game this did not happen. Instead, black played his own tactical trick. He played bishop takes h3. All of a sudden, black decided to grab a pawn and do something on the king side. It's quite obvious that he wants white to take the bishop, and then after knight takes h3, it is a double attack, fork on the white's king and queen. By the way, as we discussed earlier, notice how frequent these ideas are: check, pin, and fork. In many different examples, you'll see that these tactical ideas repeat over and over again, so it really makes sense for you to pay attention to them. Of course, Carlsen was not that naive, even though he was still young. After bishop takes h3, instead of grabbing the bishop, he just continued his attack. He played queen to h4, and now the bishop is already in trouble. Therefore, black has to take time to retreat with the bishop, and here Carlsen rushed into the very impressive attack. He started with pawn to e5, opening up another line, this time for his light-squared bishop, so that this bishop can also take part into the Carlsen's attack. Black captures with a pawn, and here comes knight h5. White wants to open up even more lines around black's king. Now, there are many lines that can happen here. I don't dive into all of the variations and sub-variations because it can take a lot of time, and it's actually a separate subject for a separate lesson probably, or even I have the entire course called Calculate Till Mate about calculating variations. So I don't dive into it here. Let's just continue with the sacrifices. Black recaptured with a pawn, and at this point I would like to challenge you to think about this position and to find the right continuation for white.